He almost didn't notice it at first, and that fact alone would haunt him for years to come, because in a company where every second was measured in millions and every decision dissected by analysts and shareholders alike, the most important breakthrough of his career happened quietly, unnoticed, behind the soft hum of a computer fan and the steady rhythm of fingers moving across a keyboard. The CEO of Valancourt Technologies, Adrian Blackwell, was used to chaos, boardroom arguments, late-night emergency calls, hostile takeovers, and billion-dollar risks, but that evening, what brought him to a complete standstill wasn't a market crash or a rival's move, it was the sight of his maid, Elena, standing in his private office long after hours, calmly solving a problem that had kept his top engineers awake for 6 straight months. The problem itself was legendary inside the company, whispered about in hallways and referenced with a mix of fear and frustration during executive meetings, a catastrophic optimization failure in Valancourt's global logistics AI, a system responsible for routing billions of dollars worth of goods across continents. A single miscalculation had begun cascading through the network, threatening losses estimated at over $200 million if it couldn't be stabilized within 48 hours. Adrian had thrown everything at it, elite engineers flown in from 3 countries, consultants billing by the minute, emergency task forces working around the clock, and still, nothing. The algorithm refused to converge, the system kept collapsing under its own complexity, and the clock kept ticking. That night, exhausted and angry, Adrian had returned to his office to grab a forgotten file, already rehearsing in his mind how he would explain the impending disaster to the board. That's when he saw the glow of the monitor. Elena stood there in her simple uniform, yellow gloves tucked into her apron pocket, her posture relaxed, her eyes focused. She didn't look nervous or rushed. She didn't look like someone touching a system that could bankrupt a company. She looked comfortable. Adrian froze in the doorway, irritation rising first. Employees were strictly forbidden from accessing executive systems, and he was about to speak when something on the screen caught his eye. Lines of code were rearranging themselves with a clarity he hadn't seen in months. Metrics that had been red for weeks were turning yellow, then green. The error propagation graph, his personal nightmare, was flattening. He held his breath, watching as Elena's fingers moved with deliberate precision, not frantic, not experimental, but confident, as if she had already seen the solution long before touching the keyboard. Seconds passed. Then, with one final command, the system stabilized. A quiet confirmation message appeared. The projected loss counter stopped climbing and began reversing. $200 million, bleeding out minute by minute, had just been stopped in less time than it took to brew a cup of coffee. Adrian felt his pulse in his ears. "How did you do that?" he asked, his voice cutting through the silence sharper than he intended. Elena turned, startled but composed, and for a moment he saw fear flicker in her eyes, not fear of failure, but fear of being seen. She apologized immediately, explaining she had only meant to clean the desk, that she noticed the system running simulations, that she recognized the pattern because she had seen something similar before. That word, recognized, echoed in Adrian's mind. His lead architect hadn't recognized the pattern. His entire R&D department hadn't recognized it. "Where?" he asked quietly. Elena hesitated, then told him a story he had never imagined hearing inside those glass and steel walls. She had grown up fixing old computers in a small apartment with her father, a former systems engineer whose career ended when the company he worked for collapsed. She studied computer science at night, aced advanced algorithms, won competitions under a borrowed name, and then life happened, medical bills, visas, responsibilities that didn't care about potential or talent. Cleaning offices paid immediately. Dreams could wait. Adrian felt something inside him crack, a mixture of shame and awe. While he had been hunting for solutions in resumes and reputations, genius had been wiping fingerprints off his desk. He didn't scold her. He didn't fire her. He asked her to sit down. That alone would later become legend. Over the next hour, Elena walked him through the flaw no one else had seen. The system wasn't failing because it was too complex, it was failing because it was too cautious, overcorrecting at every node. She introduced a simplification layer, a concept borrowed from an old research paper Adrian dimly remembered rejecting years ago. It worked because she wasn't constrained by the company's assumptions. She wasn't afraid of being wrong in front of executives. She had nothing to protect but the truth of the solution. By the time Adrian left the office that night, he knew the company would never be the same. The next morning, he called an all-hands emergency meeting. Engineers, managers, executives packed the auditorium, bracing for bad news. Instead, Adrian did something no one expected. He told the story. Not the sanitized corporate version, but the real one. He admitted failure. He admitted blindness. And then he invited Elena onto the stage. Murmurs rippled through the room as she stood there, nervous but steady, and when he announced that she had solved the $200 million problem in seconds, the silence that followed was heavier than any applause. Then came the shock. Adrian didn't just promote her. He dismantled the hiring hierarchy on the spot, announced a new internal program to surface hidden talent, and named Elena the head of a newly formed advanced systems task group, reporting directly to him. People were angry. Others were inspired. Stock analysts went wild. But the system worked. Losses were avoided. Profits rebounded. And inside Valancourt, something shifted. Innovation stopped being about titles and started being about insight. As for Elena, she didn't change overnight. She still arrived early. She still stayed late. But now, she sat at the table where decisions were made, reminding everyone that brilliance doesn't always come packaged the way you expect. And as Adrian often said in later interviews, the most expensive mistake he almost made wasn't a bad investment or a failed product, it was nearly walking past the quietest person in the room. If this story made you think, inspired you, or challenged the way you see success and talent, don't forget to subscribe to the channel right now, because every story we share is designed to open your eyes, spark your ambition, and remind you that greatness can come from anywhere, you just have to be willing to see it.